Hey y'all, this is Freeze Cracked again. I had posted a couple of videos and several people that haven't been napping that want to nap said that there was a number of the terms and stuff that I covered that they didn't understand and they didn't really get some of the stuff I was saying in the videos. So I decided to kind of go to square one and talk about the very basic aspects of napping as if I'm talking to somebody that hasn't napped at all. Um, But I also I'm going to talk about tools and stuff like that, and some definitions or terms and stuff, and basic technique stuff. And some of the things I say or some of the tools I show might be something that somebody that's been napping a while might find interesting, but a lot of it probably won't. So if you're new to the thing and want to understand a bunch of stuff, then keep watching. And if you've been napping longer than me, then you might be better off watching somebody else's work for the moment. At any rate, flintknapping. Flintknapping is dangerous as hell, okay? And if you're not going to admit that to yourself, then you might, ought to take up something else. And so first I want to talk about ways to lessen the risk. Some of us don't follow all our own thoughts on the subject, but there's definitely ways to lessen risk. You have a number of risks. One of the things is, you can do crushing blows to yourself if you're starting out and your hand-eye coordination isn't great, and you end up hitting your thumb with a giant billet or something. And I've done that. I mean, I did that when I started. But the bigger problem is cuts, and cuts can be really bad depending upon how deep they are and where they are. But then the other thing, of course, the most vulnerable aspect, I guess, is your eyes. And some rocks, when you hit them, are kind of bad. Obsidian, if you hit it, especially if you hit it wrong, it just puts a little cloud of dust, little micro fine shards of glass in the air and stuff. And so there's things that you really need to do if you want to try and minimize your likelihood of needing to run to the hospital real quick or having a big problem. So I'm going to talk about that for just a second. The first thing, of course, is covering your legs. A lot of people nap on their leg or they nap near their legs, and you get dust, you get shards, you get all that kind of stuff on you. And one of the typical ways of blocking that is leather. And I add even heavier leather as a padding, because when I do certain things where I hit hard on my leg, you bruise your leg. I mean, you turn your leg black with some of the stuff you can do, especially when you're starting out. So I've got a 1/2 inch or so thick pad of buffalo hide, and then some moose, and then I've got a little thinner moose on the other leg just to keep crap off of it. But one of the things that's big on that is, especially when you're working a rock that's really the kind that just cuts you to ribbons, what you do is you take a flake or something, you get all these little flakes on your pad and you just dump them off. And dumping them off, when they're on the ground, they don't tend to jump up and get on you. They do get in your shoes, and that's a whole other issue. But dumping your flakes all the time, very frequently, is a way to keep them from cutting the backs of your hands and stuff like that. And I especially dump a lot when I'm working obsidian. So that's one point. Another thing that some people do is they wear gloves. Now, I usually don't wear gloves, and by not wearing gloves, I know that I'm going to cut myself more, and I deal with that issue. But the nitrile coated thin, it's a thin rubber stuff, but it's really good for whatever reason. It's stopping little cuts getting through stuff. It still gives you some feel, is the reason that it's desirable. The feel is really important underneath rocks, because what that's called is support. And what you do underneath the rock while you're hitting it or pushing on it a lot of times matters dramatically. It's a major part of flintknapping. So that's the reason a lot of times I take the risk of getting cuts and just support with my bare hand. But especially when you're starting out, and especially when you're working obsidian, a nitrile glove or something can really help you. Another point is wearing a glove on your other hand. You would think that your striking hand when you're hitting a rock or whatever is not at risk. Well, it is at risk. And one of the major ways in which it's at risk is when you strike a rock. When you hit a rock, take a big billet or whatever, and you hit a rock, a lot of times, if you're not, especially if you haven't been doing it a long time, you don't control the flakes that come off as well. And if you go by it and you're passing it and a flake comes down and flips over, it can just cut the crap out of your hand, your hitting hand. And one of the worst cuts I ever got it was in the field when I was spalling and trimming some big rock. And that's what happened is that, you know, I had a glove on the hand I was holding the rocks with, but I didn't have a glove on the other hand. And as I went by, the flake flipped over and got me. So anyway, those are some things to think about. Eye protection, your eyes are at great risk. And even if you wear regular glasses, they're kind of at risk, because what can happen and what does happen is sometimes a little flake will bounce up and it hits your cheek right underneath your glasses and pops up behind your glasses and can get in your eye. And one of the things, especially when I work obsidian, I tend to have water, a bottle of water, where I can real quick lay back and get my eyes pointed skyward and pour water in my eyes if I need to. And I have done that one time before, at least once that I can think of. And so your eyes need to be protected because the stuff jumps up. Kind of a funny story I heard at a nap-in was about a guy getting a flake stuck in the end of his nose. But that's a whole other issue. So if you want to wear some kind of nose guard, that might be a good thing too. I'm not saying not to. But anyway, some kind of eye protection. That stuff is cheap, really. So anyway. Now, I would never suggest to you that when you cut yourself that you glue your cuts. I would never suggest that, okay? I would suggest that you put, you know, Band-Aids, maybe Band-Aids. My problem is I can't seem to get my cuts to stop bleeding instantaneously, and I like to get back in the game kind of quick. And I'm not saying by any stretch that anybody on the planet should super glue cuts, okay? I always have super glue with me. So that's, I guess, the boring part, the part about safety. That, and don't assume you're not going to get injured. The crazy part about it is, like, there's a couple of different kinds of knapping, and one of the kinds is called abo, and it requires you to swing heavier, bigger stuff, and sometimes to take your flakes. And decelerating heavy billets is bad. Okay, it hurts a lot if you hit on your leg, but when you're holding stuff off your leg and you're swinging and decelerating, and you stop that billet, if you miss, say you miss and you stop that billet, it does some really bad things. One of the first things it does is it tries to rip your tendon off your epicondyle there, and leads to a situation called medial epicondylitis, which basically is tennis elbow that can really shut you down for quite some time. But the other thing is, it can pull your neck and your shoulder and your back muscles, and you just have to take it carefully and slowly and easily at first with what you're trying to do until you figure out how to do it. I swing pretty hard, and there is an advantage to that, but you got to kind of know what you can put up with. So anyway, those are the basics of injuring yourself. Bear in mind that, you know, some of the stuff we do, like a lot of times you use your legs and you get in here with doing pressure and stuff like that. Well, you're working fairly close to your femoral arteries. You just got different potential issues. Your feet, when you're out in the field, you know, you pick up a big old rock and you hit a big old flake off of it, and that flake falls, you know, and if it falls into your foot, it can be an issue. I actually, my son stuck a big old flake of obsidian in the ground between his feet one time when we were collecting obsidian. So anyway, safety. All right, so you read up on safety and get to be a lot safer than me, and that'll be good. And if you want to keep flint napping after everything I've told you, then that's good too. I'm a flint napper, so I'm not talking against it or nothing. All right, so I want to talk for just a brief minute about rock, but I really kind of want to do another video later on rock. But basically, what you need to understand about the reason we can flint nap is because some materials break in a predictable, understandable manner if you learn them. If you learn what they do, they tend to kind of reliably do it, and that allows you to control the process and get an arrowhead out of a big old ugly rock. And that characteristic that they have that's desirable to us is called conchoidal fracture. Basically, if you've ever seen a little ding in a window, like a BB hits a window or something like that, where it makes that little circular popped out cone type thing, that is a conchoidal fracture. And some rocks do that. And the fact that they do means that you can predict the angles and stuff that a fracture will occur at, and you can use that against the rock to get what you want out of it. But they don't all do that. And one of the problems with being new is a lot of times you don't understand and you don't know rock well enough to see a rock and know what it'll do, and even to hit a rock and know if what occurs is a result of the rock or you, and that's a problem. So if you're gonna be a flint knapper, I suggest that you get a number of different types of material that is more or less known to be okay for flint knapping, even though it'll cost you money maybe, and make sure you hit a few things that you know are probably good, so that you'll be able to come to understand the difference. So when you go out in the field and you start picking up crap and hitting it, and it doesn't work at all, you'll know, well, maybe I should drop this rock and ignore it because the rock is the problem, not me. It can be very frustrating, and you can put a lot of wear and tear on your elbow beating on stuff that's of no value and really isn't very knappable, okay? So anyway, basically this is just a raw river cobble, and a lot of people cook rock that isn't good to work raw. And by cooking it, I mean that there's formulas online and stuff, and there's people that use actual kilns, but actually there's also people that use like turkey roasters to heat rock carefully and slowly in increments up to a particular known temperature that the rock tends to favor for becoming a little bit more workable. And I've never heard a great total explanation of the process that causes that. But I think basically the crystalline structure of rock, some rock has a little bit bigger crystals and stuff, and it's cemented together. These are all sedimentary rocks for the most part, cemented together, and that heating them somehow just kind of smooths out the joins or whatever between the rocks, and or micro fractures tiny bit the rock to make it where it's more workable, more compliant. The stuff isn't as structurally strong after that happens, but a lot of it still remains pretty strong if it was real strong to start with, and it's something that's done quite a bit. Another reason it's done quite a bit is for colors. Sometimes heating up rock, you know, it'll oxidize minerals that are in it, especially things that have been in water, and it can make some real pretty colors in this stuff, reds and blues and different stuff. Anyway, so basically this is just a river cobble, and if you see a big, this is a small one, but just happen to have this in my bucket here. This is a what's called a spall. A spall is actually like a large flake usually, and this is like the smallest spall in the world. Most spalls would be considered bigger, but they're workable flakes that are normally kind of flattened, that are taken off of a big rock, like a big monolithic piece of rock, for the purpose of taking it home and working. And usually anytime you see anything like this, and then when you start hitting stuff, what you see is, you see what's called a platform, and that's the place where it was hit. It's usually a flattened area that is good for hitting. And when you hit rock, it tends to, when it starts the fracture, it makes a big dome-shaped kind of area from the initial force is so high, and that's called like a bulb of percussion. And if you were doing it with pushing on it, it'd be a bulb of pressure. But at any rate, you get those little bulbs, and then it kind of flattens and runs. So this is the side that was facing the rock when the flake was taken, and this was the outside of it. But there's no, the skin on a rock, like on this other rock here, is called a cortex. And the cortex comes in all different flavors. Some of it is thick and chalky and just completely dampens any strike, and that can be really annoying to try and get off. But some of it is thin like this and hard. But it's all kind of squirrely compared to the rock inside, so one of the first challenges you have usually is getting the cortex off, and sometimes it's kind of hard to get into a rock, but that's for another video. At any rate, I'm at 15 minutes, so I'm going to stop and come back and talk about tools. Bye.